they're definitely tempered. I don't think that we can expect with no off season for us to come out and be hitting on all cylinders. I know that we've spent a lot of time in Zoom meetings, Pat and his staff on the offensive side have spent a lot of time with it, but there's nothing like being on the practice field. And so it's going to be a slow build, and the expectations of Drew, I mean, he did play well for 5 games, but that was only 5 games last year. Didn't have the off season this year, which, you know, for young football players is always very, very important.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight. Big show for you, as always. Alexis Perry is going to join us coming up in the next segment. Steve Atwater on a little later. But, Benjamin, we're going to start with John Elway talking about tempered expectations for Drew Lock. I don't want to put the brakes on before the season's even started, but it does seem like we have some reasons why there should be. Do you think there should be?
Well, much like with your expectations for my wardrobe each show, sometimes we come in thinking highly and somebody doesn't quite live up to that standard that we set. I think that the Drew Lock hyperbole in the national media has gotten a bit high, and that's where these remarks are coming from. When you've got the Colin Cowards of the world talking about Drew Lock as a potential MVP, the last thing you want to do is set a young guy up for failure by setting the bar at MVP right off the bat. How about let's go out and win some football games? How about let's go out and, let's make the playoffs. Let's beat the Chiefs. Let's set the bar a little bit lower in targets that we know we can meet and build the guy's confidence up and go from there. So, I think this lowered expectations thing isn't it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's how about let's be realistic about Drew Lock.
I think tempered is a little bit different than lower, but maybe we are splitting a little bit of hairs. I mean, it's about his development. And I think that's kind of where John's coming from on that soundbite. He's talking about, understanding the guy's getting his first opportunity to come in as the starter, but he didn't get a normal starter's offseason. Didn't get OTAs, no mandatory minicamp. He's not getting preseason action to get really tuned up. And I guess, what does that actually look like as far as our tempered expectations? Does that mean we maybe expect the offense to struggle early on?
Well, I think 6,000 yards, 60 touchdowns in the first 4 games. I think those are,
realistic.
You're right. I think that people have gotten to that level of hyperbole. There's such an excitement about the young, dynamic offense that the Broncos are ostensibly going to field this year that perhaps expectation has gotten a little out of control. And John Elway's trying to remind us, hey, this is a group of young guys that don't have a lot of experience, that are coming in from a very bizarre offseason and didn't really have a chance. Oh, by the way, there's a new offensive coordinator on top of it. And they're trying to learn and put this thing together. And so the idea that they're going to come out and set the world on fire is maybe not something we should expect.
Speaking of those traits, John Elway also spoke about that and Drew Lock's maturity.
I think that what we saw last year and the maturity that he saw when he went in and did play and the success that he did have late in the year, I think he'll take that same mentality into this year with a better idea of what's going on. Obviously, again, we didn't talk about this, but we have a new system going on. So going in with Pat coming in as the offensive coordinator. So trying to blend the offenses the best he can and the terminology that the best that he can. But, it's still going to be a new offense and a new feel. So, but I think with what we saw in Drew, the maturity that he showed when he was in there last year, that he really, wasn't affected by the size of the game. And I think that's what you never know about a young quarterback, how he's going to handle that. And I thought, of anything, Drew handled that as well as we could have expected.
So, yeah, as you heard there, he talked a lot about his maturity, and we definitely saw a big part of that as the games went on there towards the end of the season. But I also kind of want to look at it more from the kind of players that are surrounding Drew Lock, because that's something that the Broncos have really put a heavy intent on this roster, even on the offensive side, though they are young. They're kind of a mature group, aren't they?
They really are. And Cortland Sutton is a guy who's wise beyond his years. I mean, where he's going into this year, this will be his 3rd year in the NFL, but he feels like a guy who's been around the league half a decade or more. And then you look at Phil Lindsay, a guy who just gets it. He's got that chip on his shoulder, that elite work ethic. Melvin Gordon, a guy who's been around a little bit, has a little bit of seasoning. Noah Fant really kind of grew up in season 1 as well. And, some of these down roster guys get it too. Dalton Reisner come in, as a rookie, but felt like a vet. Tim Patrick, probably the tenured veteran amongst this offense and receiving core, is a guy who has wise words at times when you need to hear that kind of stuff. So I think there is a maturity to the pieces around him that maybe we're not giving enough credit to, but there is still a youth and a naivety with some of this, and it's going to be fun finding the balance for these guys.
Well, and that balance we've talked about a ton on the radio show, because especially with Drew Lock is a guy that I think from the public persona, everybody sees the kind of goofy, he's rapping on the sideline, he's doing the Buzz Lightyear stuff. And so people probably don't think maturity when they see Drew Lock. But you talk to the guys in the locker room, and it is a little bit of a different story, isn't it?
Well, much like your partner here, they see the goofiness in front of the camera. They don't see the fact that I'm literally sitting right here with a book of Tolstoy off to the side, and going to be reading at a high level after this. So, no, I think Drew is. He's mature. He gets it from a football perspective. He's a guy who understands the leadership component, but also understands the keeping it loose and having guys buy in. And there's a balance to that. And we've seen quarterbacks come in here that have had one or the other, but maybe not that complete package. Peyton Manning was a great leader. He tried to keep it as loose as he could, but he was more erring on the side of the scholastic approach to football, where Drew maybe errs more a little on the side of keeping it loose. Joe Flacco, a guy who didn't really keep it loose. He was just kind of Joe. Case Keenum was a guy that didn't really have that either. So, I think having a guy like Drew who's got that complete package in terms of leadership is really going to help in that locker room.